I never thought I'd be writing this kind of story. I always considered my marriage with Lisa as solid, like picture-perfect solid. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5, and on most days it felt like we were a team. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but who doesn't? We had our date nights, laughed at stupid shows, and planned for this big future together. But then, almost out of nowhere, the cracks started to show. The first signs were subtle. Lisa had started to spend more time at work, often coming home late and acting a little more aloof than usual. At first, I brushed it off as just the stress of her new job. I even tried to be supportive, picking up more chores around the house and asking if she needed anything. But the more I tried, the more distant she seemed. I found myself questioning things, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, who doesn't have a tough time at work occasionally, right? Things took a turn when I stumbled across her phone one evening. She had left it on the kitchen counter while she took a quick shower. I hesitated for a moment. It felt wrong to look, but my gut was screaming at me. I picked it up to see a flood of messages from someone named Jake. My heart sank as I opened one. It was flirty, way too flirty. I couldn't believe it at first. There they were, exchanging inside jokes, emojis, and something that made my stomach churn. They were talking about a secret rendezvous. That night I felt like I was spiraling. My mind raced with questions. Who was this Jake guy? What did he have that I did? I tossed and turned in bed, fully aware that Lisa was sleeping soundly next to me, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside my head. When morning came, I was a wreck. I had to confront her, but I also had to come up with a plan. I knew I couldn't just go in guns blazing. I needed proof. As the days went on, I started to observe her more closely. I noticed the way she smiled at her phone, the little giggles that seemed to be reserved for private conversations. I felt like a detective in a bad movie, gathering bits of evidence to piece together the narrative. What I found was enough to fill a screenplay. She was lying to me, not just about her late nights, but about everything. Friends started to notice the change in her too. Some of them even came to me asking if everything was okay because Lisa seemed different, more short-tempered, a little more dismissive. I wanted to scream, I know, at them, but I kept my mouth shut. I was determined to get to the bottom of this myself. Finally, everything came to a head one Friday night when I tracked her phone activity. I noticed she was texting Jake right up until she went out with friends. That night, I decided to follow her. It felt like something out of a suspense thriller. I parked a few blocks away from the bar she said she would be at and waited. My heart pounded as I saw her walk in. Only she didn't go inside alone. She was with Jake and they were laughing, leaning into each other, just like the text had suggested. I couldn't sit there any longer. I bolted out of my car and marched into the bar. The moment I stepped in, I felt like the entire world stopped. Lisa looked shocked to see me, her eyes wide, and for a split second I thought she might be honest. But that thought shattered when Jake grinned at me like he had won some kind of twisted prize. I walked right up to them, and the tension in the air could have been cut with a knife. "Lisa, we need to talk," I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was a volcanic eruption waiting to happen. Her face fell as she stammered out weak excuses, claiming it was just harmless flirting. I could see Jake shifting awkwardly beside her, and I thought to myself, how pathetic is this guy? I was hurt and angry, and she was trying to downplay it all. The way she was spinning her words made it sound like I was being unreasonable. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her see how deeply she was hurting me, but instead I just stood there, feeling my heart break all over again. I knew this was the moment that would change everything. The confrontation spiraled into a whirlwind of accusations and lies. She claimed that I had been neglecting her, that I didn't understand her needs, and that this was just a mistake. All I could do was stare at her in disbelief. How could she say that? I had been there for her through everything. I was left standing there, feeling like a shadow of the man I used to be. That night marked the beginning of a long, tumultuous emotional journey. I left the bar, my mind racing. I didn't know what to feel first, the anger that burned in my gut or the crushing sadness that had settled in my chest. I had never felt so betrayed, so lost, and so alone. How could someone I loved and trusted so deeply turn around and stab me in the back like this? The days following the confrontation felt like a blur. I kept replaying the scene in my head, like a tape stuck on repeat. The image of Lisa sitting there with Jake, laughing and leaning into him, haunted me. I tried to go through the motions of daily life, but everything felt hollow. The world continued spinning, but I was trapped in a storm of emotions, unable to find my footing. Lisa didn't address what happened right away. Instead, she acted like nothing was wrong. She would brush past me in the house, her demeanor almost nonchalant, as if the confrontation never happened. I could see her trying to pretend that we could go back to how things were before, but I wasn't naive. I recognized the manipulation. It was a twisted game she was playing, trying to paint me as the irrational one while she continued her affair on the side. It infuriated me. I began to isolate myself from friends. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to explain the raw, aching pain I felt. I started working late nights, finding solace in the routine of my job. But the escape was only temporary. I often found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, unable to focus. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concern with half-hearted smiles and vague excuses. Then came the fateful day when I discovered the full extent of her betrayal. I arrived home early one evening, planning to surprise her with dinner. As I entered the house, I heard her voice coming from the bedroom. At first, I thought she was on a call, but as I got closer, I realized she was laughing. Not just a giggle, but that full, genuine laughter I hadn't heard in weeks. It was the sound that made my stomach drop. I knew instantly that Jake was there. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak flood through me. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Should I let it go and confront her later, or should I walk in and expose the facade she was maintaining? My mind raced, and I opted for confrontation. I kicked open the bedroom door, and there they were, Lisa sprawled across the bed, her phone in hand, with Jake beside her. The shock on their faces was priceless. "Really? This is how you treat your husband?" I spat out, my voice rising in pitch. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a mix of anger and humiliation washing over me. Lisa scrambled to sit up, her expression shifting from shock to defensiveness. "What are you doing here?" She snapped like she had every right to be indignant. "What am I doing here?" I shot back, incredulously. "What the hell are you doing? How could you do this to me?" Jake, still half-dressed, stuttered out some excuse about them just hanging out. The audacity of it sent me into a frenzy. I didn't care that he was there, my focus was on Lisa. I was done playing games. I wanted the truth, and I wanted it now. "Is this how you've been spending your nights out? Feeding me lies while sharing a bed with this loser?" I could feel the rage bubbling over, and yet there was something almost surreal about the entire situation. My heart was racing, and I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but somehow I held them back, channeling that energy into my words. Lisa's defenses crumbled slightly, and she attempted to spin it around, claiming it was a rough patch and that I didn't understand her needs. "You've been so busy with work, I felt neglected," she cried, as if that justified her actions. "Neglected?" I echoed, incredulous. "That's a pathetic excuse for cheating, Lisa. You could have come to me and talked, but instead you chose to betray me." The argument escalated quickly, hurtful words flew like arrows between us. For every lie she tried to sell, I countered with the truth of my love and commitment. I had poured my heart into this relationship, only for her to toy with it like it was nothing. When Jake tried to interject, I turned my full attention on him, dismissing him with a wave of my hand. "You're nothing but a pawn in her twisted game. The moment she's done playing you, you'll be tossed aside like yesterday's news. You think that's love? You might as well be her backup plan." I watched as he shifted uncomfortably, caught between us. I could see the regret on his face, and for a brief moment I felt a pang of sympathy for him. But then I remembered that he was willingly part of this mess. He could have walked away, but he chose to indulge in the fantasy instead. The confrontation came to a head when Lisa shouted, "Maybe you should leave then. If you think I'm so terrible, why don't you just walk out the door?" I paused, feeling a wave of sorrow crash over me. This was not a woman I recognized. The woman I loved would never have pushed me away like that, not ever. I realized I needed to take a step back before I did something I'd regret. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving behind the chaos of despair. I didn't look back. I drove aimlessly around the city, my mind racing with thoughts. How could someone I once trusted so completely turn into a stranger? As the reality of the situation sank in, I made a decision. I couldn't allow this to continue. I needed to take control of my life, and I knew I had to confront Lisa one last time. But this time, I would do it on my terms. The emotional toll was deep. I was heartbroken, furious, and overwhelmed by a sense of betrayal I had never experienced before. My world had shifted beneath my feet, and I was left struggling to find my footing again. But I was determined to emerge from this stronger, and the first step was to reclaim my power. I had learned a harsh lesson. Time revealed character, and now I was ready for the next chapter. After that explosive confrontation, I felt a mix of relief and heaviness wash over me. It was as if I had opened a dam, and the flood of emotions that poured out was overwhelming. I had finally confronted Lisa, but it left me feeling hollow. I spent the next few days trying to regain my composure, but every corner of my home felt tainted with her betrayal. I couldn't escape the memories of our life together, and the thought of her with Jake gnawed at me. In the days that followed, I kept a distance. Instead of returning home, I stayed with a friend, Mark, who had no idea what was going on. I needed a breather, a moment to clear my head. Mark was a good guy, always the life of the party and someone I could rely on when things got tough. I filled him in on the situation, careful not to paint myself as the victim, but rather as a man who had been blindsided by the woman I loved. "Dude, you deserve better," he said over a beer in his living room. "You can't let her walk all over you like that. You've got to set some boundaries." His words echoed in my mind. I knew he was right. I had allowed this to fester for too long, hoping it would resolve itself. But the reality was that Lisa's actions spoke volumes, and I needed to do something about it. That night I decided to head back home, but I wasn't going to confront her again just yet. I needed to think this through. I walked through the front door, and the house was eerily quiet. I could feel the tension in the air as I made my way to the living room. There she was, sitting on the couch, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hi," I replied tersely, crossing my arms. I wasn't ready to let this turn into a soft moment filled with tears. I needed to maintain my composure. "I've been thinking about what happened," she said, her gaze dropping to her hands. "I want to talk about it." "Talk," I scoffed. "What's there to talk about, Lisa? You made your choice." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw genuine remorse flash across her face. But then she quickly masked it with a defensive tone. "It's not as simple as that. I made a mistake, but I want to work on our marriage. I love you." "Love," I echoed, my voice rising. "You don't do this to someone you love. What you did was selfish and cruel. You can't just throw that word around and expect me to forget everything." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up my hand, stopping her. I didn't want to get caught in another cycle of her excuses. I had to regain my power. "Here's the deal," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not asking for a reconciliation right now. I need space to think, to figure out if this can ever work again. You need to understand that I'm not going to tolerate this behavior anymore." Her expression morphed into anger, but I could see the cracks forming. "You're really going to throw everything away over one mistake?" She shot back, her voice laced with frustration. "It was one mistake, Lisa. You didn't trip and fall into bed with someone else. You made a choice," I retorted, feeling the fire within me reignite. "You chose to betray me, and now I have to choose what's best for me." Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could see her mind racing, trying to process my words. For a moment I felt a flicker of hope that she would come to her senses, but I quickly pushed that aside. I couldn't rely on her to make this right. "Fine," she finally said, her voice low. "If that's what you want, I'll give you space." I nodded, relieved that I had taken a stand, but inside I felt a tumult of emotions. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, nor could I ignore the love I still felt for her. I was torn between wanting to salvage what was left and knowing that it might be better to let it go. As the days turned into weeks, we lived in a tense silence. I focused on work and leaned on Mark for support. He encouraged me to get out, meet new people, and explore my independence. It felt strange at first, like I was abandoning something that used to define me. I was still married, but I felt more like a solitary figure navigating a new life. One Friday evening, Mark invited me to a local bar to unwind. I hesitated but ultimately decided to go. I needed a break from the heaviness that had enveloped me for too long. The bar was bustling, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I felt a small spark of excitement as I entered. It had been ages since I had let loose. As I settled in with a drink, I noticed a group of women at the counter. One of them caught my eye. She had an infectious laugh and a lively spirit that drew me in. I found myself smiling, feeling a sense of freedom that had been absent for weeks. Maybe this was what I needed, a reminder that life still existed beyond the walls of my troubled marriage. The evening unfolded, filled with laughter and conversation. I found myself connecting with this woman whose name was Sarah. We ended up talking for hours, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was living in the moment. I shared snippets of my life with her, carefully omitting the painful details about Lisa. I wanted to focus on the positive, on the potential for happiness. As the night wore on, I realized how much I had neglected myself during the past few months. I had put everything on the back burner, wrapped up in a web of heartbreak and betrayal. But sitting there with Sarah, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself that I thought was lost. When I finally returned home that night, a sense of clarity washed over me. I knew I still had some difficult decisions ahead, but I had taken a crucial step towards redefining my life. Tomorrow would hold its challenges, but for now, I was ready to embrace the unknown, ready to explore a future that wasn't dictated by betrayal and hurt. I had learned that time had a way of revealing character, and I was determined to move forward, stronger and more self-aware than ever before. The days continued to pass, and I found myself navigating a strange duality in my life. On one hand, I was still living with Lisa, the woman who had shattered my trust. On the other, I was slowly rediscovering who I was, thanks to the unexpected connection I had forged with Sarah. It wasn't that I was ready to jump into a new relationship. Rather, I was awakening to the possibility that happiness could exist beyond the pain I had been swimming in for so long. My interactions with Lisa were strained, filled with awkward silences and half-hearted attempts at conversation. She seemed to sense the distance growing between us. I would catch her watching me, her expression a mix of confusion and regret. One evening, she tried to initiate a heart-to-heart, but I wasn't ready to dive into the emotional turmoil all over again. I had set my boundaries, and right now, they were firmly in place. Every night after work, I'd meet up with Mark or go to the bar to see Sarah. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and she made me feel alive again. I appreciated her understanding nature. She didn't push me to share every detail about my life, but when I did open up about Lisa, she listened without judgment. It felt good to talk to someone who treated me like I mattered, not someone I had to defend myself against. One evening, as Mark and I sat at our usual spot at the bar, he leaned in, his gaze serious. "You No, man, it's been a while since I've seen you smile like this. You've got to keep going in this direction. Life's too short to waste on someone who doesn't appreciate you." I nodded, but the thought of letting Lisa go completely sent waves of anxiety through me. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff looking down at the unknown depths below. "I just don't know if I can walk away, you know. I still love her. There's history there and I just can't shake it." Mark's expression softened. "It's okay to love her, but you have to love yourself first. You've given so much and you deserve someone who respects you, not someone who plays games and lies. It's not about erasing the past, it's about making room for a future that brings you joy." His words resonated deeply. It was a reminder that I didn't have to stay trapped in a cycle of pain. I needed to prioritize my own happiness, even if it meant making tough decisions. A week later, Lisa asked if we could talk. I hadn't expected it, and I felt a mix of dread and anticipation wash over me. We sat down in the living room, both of us cautious in our body language. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice shaky. "I know I messed up. I really do care about you and I want to fix this. I'll do anything to make things right." I took a deep breath, my heart racing. "Lisa, it's not that simple. You've hurt me in a way that I don't know if I can come back from. You broke my trust, and it'll take more than just words to fix that." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt a flicker of empathy, but I quickly pushed it aside. I had to stay strong. "You had your chance to be honest with me, and you chose to betray me. I can't ignore that." "I know, but I've realized how much I've taken you for granted," she pleaded. "I can change. I want to go to counseling together. I want to show you that I can be the wife you deserve. Please, give me that chance." The desperation in her voice was palpable, but I couldn't help but notice that it felt more like a plea for forgiveness than a genuine desire for change. "Counseling might help, but I need to be honest with you. I don't know if I want this anymore. I need time to think about what I want." The silence that followed was heavy. I could see her processing my words, and it felt like she was grasping at straws. Eventually, she nodded, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resignation. "I understand. I just hope you give me a chance to prove myself." That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I felt a sense of relief for standing my ground, but there was also an ache in my chest. It hurt to see her in pain, but I knew I couldn't let guilt dictate my choices. It was time for me to take control of my life. The next day, I met up with Sarah again, and we fell into easy conversation. She had a warmth about her that was refreshing. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to our dreams for the future. I found myself laughing freely, something I hadn't done in ages. When she reached over and playfully nudged my arm, it felt electric. It hit me that I was reclaiming a part of myself I thought I had lost. Over the next few weeks, my interactions with Lisa continued to feel strained. I focused on establishing boundaries. I was civil, but I didn't engage in deep conversations. As I started to carve out my own space, I felt empowered. I was living for myself, exploring life beyond betrayal, slowly but surely healing. Then I received a surprising text from Sarah one evening. "Hey, would you like to come to a concert with me next week? I have an extra ticket, and I think it would be a lot of fun." I stared at the message for a long moment, my heart racing. This was a big step. I had been so cautious about dating again, but the thought of going out with Sarah excited me. It felt like an invitation to embrace new experiences rather than dwell on the past. With a mixture of excitement and nerves, I typed back, "I'd love to, count me in." The concert turned out to be a turning point for me. The energy in the venue was electric, the music pulsing through the crowd as we danced and sang along. I felt liberated, surrounded by people who were there to enjoy life. I looked over at Sarah, her face lit up with joy, and I realized how refreshing it was to be with someone who didn't carry the weight of my past. As the night drew to a close, we walked out together, the chatter of the crowd fading behind us. I turned to Sarah, feeling a warmth in my chest. "Thank you for tonight. I really needed this." She smiled back, and in that moment I saw a glimpse of a future filled with possibility. It was small, but it was significant. I was beginning to understand that I didn't have to remain anchored to my past. I could choose to move forward, and I could choose happiness. As I headed home that night, my heart felt lighter. I still had unresolved issues with Lisa, but I also had hope for myself. Time had revealed character, and my journey was just beginning. I was ready to face whatever came next. The following weeks were a whirlwind of self-discovery and emotional turmoil. I was navigating the complexities of my relationship with Lisa while also exploring the potential of something new with Sarah. It felt like I was wearing two separate masks, one for the world I had known for years and another for the uncharted territory I was beginning to explore. With Lisa, the atmosphere in our home felt increasingly strained. We were no longer the couple who shared laughter and dreams. Instead, we were two strangers living under the same roof. I continued to maintain my boundaries, and each day felt like a test of my resolve. I had moments of weakness where I would catch myself reminiscing about the happy times we shared, but those memories felt tainted now. It was a bitter pill to swallow. One evening, I returned home after another night out with Mark and Sarah. I had a good time, but I felt a gnawing guilt wash over me as I opened the door to our quiet home. Lisa sat on the couch, looking up as I entered. Her expression was unreadable, and in that moment I felt a pang of sadness for both of us. "Hey," she said softly, almost hesitantly. "How was your night?" "Good," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Just hanging out with friends." She nodded, her eyes searching mine for something, an assurance perhaps, or a sign that everything would be okay. I've been thinking a lot about us. I really want to try to work things out. I miss you, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I took a deep breath, weighing my words. I miss the way we used to be too, but I don't think we can just snap back to that. Trust has to be rebuilt, and I don't know if I can do that right now. Her face fell, and I could see the flicker of desperation in her eyes. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll go to counseling, I'll change. Just give me another chance, please. I wanted to believe her, to believe that there could be a future where we could heal. But all I could picture was the hurt, the betrayal, and the way she had turned my world upside down. Lisa, it's not just about you wanting to fix things. I need to heal too, and right now, being together feels toxic. She fell silent, her head hanging low. I felt a mix of compassion and frustration. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it would be all right, but I knew that it wouldn't. The truth was, we were both in pain, but our paths were diverging. As the conversation faded into uncomfortable silence, I made the decision to leave the living room and retreat to my bedroom. I needed space to breathe and think. My mind was racing with all the moments that had led us to this point, and I felt myself teetering on an emotional edge. A few days later, I found myself at a local coffee shop, sitting across from Sarah. We had developed a routine of meeting up on weekends, and I was beginning to look forward to our time together. She had a way of making me feel at ease, and I appreciated her gentle encouragement. "So, how are things going with Lisa?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. I hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the tangled emotions that churned inside me. "It's been tough. We're living together, but it feels like we're worlds apart. I don't know if I can ever get past what she did. Have you thought about what you want moving forward?" She probed gently. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Part of me feels guilty for even considering moving on, while another part of me knows I deserve better. It's just so complicated." Sarah nodded, a knowing expression on her face. "It's okay to take time to figure it out. Just remember, you don't owe anyone an explanation for your happiness." Her words resonated with me, bolstering my resolve. I realized that it was time to stop carrying the weight of guilt and obligation. I needed to prioritize my own happiness and well-being. That evening, I decided to have another conversation with Lisa. I wanted to be clear about where I stood, to give her the respect of honesty. We sat down, and I could see a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Lisa," I began, my voice steady, "I want to be upfront with you. After everything that's happened, I don't think we can go back to how things were. It might be best for both of us if we take some time apart." Her eyes widened in shock, and I could see the realization dawning on her. "You're saying you want a separation?" "Yes," I confirmed. "I think it's what we both need right now. I need to explore my own feelings without the weight of our past hanging over me." She looked devastated, and I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. "But I can change. I can prove to you that I can be better." I shook my head, determined. "You may very well be able to change, but right now, I can't be the one to support that process. I need to prioritize my own healing. This isn't just about you anymore, it's about us both finding a way to move forward." The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. I could see her fighting back tears, and I felt the urge to comfort her, but I knew that would only complicate things further. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "If that's what you need, I won't fight you on it." It took everything in me not to feel guilt wash over me. I knew this was the right decision. And yet it felt bittersweet. After that conversation, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation. I had taken a step toward reclaiming my own life and happiness. I was still facing the emotional fallout from my past, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The very next day, I met up with Sarah again, and it felt like a breath of fresh air. I shared the news of my separation, and she listened intently, her expression supportive. "I'm proud of you for taking that step," she said, her eyes bright with encouragement. "You deserve to explore what makes you happy." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of hope. I was ready to embrace this new chapter, to let go of the past and see where life would take me. I had learned that time reveals character, and now I was ready to discover my own. The weight of betrayal was starting to lift, replaced with the promise of a new beginning. As the days passed, the separation from Lisa began to feel more like liberation than loss. I still had moments of sadness, memories that would creep in uninvited, reminders of the good times we had shared. But as I immersed myself in this new phase of my life, I started to rediscover who I was outside of our relationship. I was learning to embrace my identity as an individual rather than half of a couple. With each passing day, I grew more comfortable with the decision I had made. I threw myself into activities that had once brought me joy but had been sidelined during our marriage. I began reconnecting with old friends, delving back into hobbies, and even taking up running, which helped clear my mind and lift my spirits. There was something empowering about taking control of my life again. Sarah and I continued to see each other, and our connection deepened. We shared laughter, dreams, and conversations that felt light and genuine. I had grown fond of her, drawn to her kindness, and the way she made me feel seen and appreciated. I knew I wasn't ready for a serious relationship yet, but I enjoyed every moment we spent together. It was refreshing, a reminder that joy was still possible. One evening, as we walked through the city after a dinner date, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "You know, I don't think I would have gotten through this without your support," I said, glancing over at her. "You've been a bright spot in a really dark time." She smiled warmly, the kind of smile that made my heart swell. "I'm just glad I could be here for you. You deserve to be happy, and I'm glad you're finding your way." Those words hit me hard. It was a gentle reminder of how far I had come in such a short time. I had faced betrayal head-on and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the possibilities ahead. It was liberating to know that I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning to thrive. As I settled into this new chapter of my life, I made sure to check in with Lisa from time to time. I wanted to be respectful during the separation, and I knew she was processing her own emotions. We had a few conversations about logistics, splitting up our belongings, figuring out finances, but I kept it strictly business. I wasn't ready to dive back into the emotional mess that had defined our relationship for so long, and I sensed that she was still trying to come to terms with everything. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old photos at home, I stumbled upon a picture of us from happier times. We were at a wedding, laughing and dancing, our faces full of joy. I felt a pang of nostalgia wash over me, but I quickly reminded myself of the pain that had followed. It was a bittersweet reminder of what had been, and I recognized that while those moments had been real, they were now part of my past. That evening, I texted Lisa to check in, just to see how she was doing. I felt a sense of responsibility to ensure she was okay, even though we were apart. Her response was brief but heartfelt. "I'm trying to focus on my own healing too. It's been hard, but I appreciate you reaching out." I felt a flicker of hope that maybe we could both find a way to heal, but I knew it wouldn't be as a couple. I had learned that trust, once broken, takes time and effort to rebuild, and right now, we were on different journeys. As spring turned into summer, I embraced the changes in my life. I found myself more engaged at work, taking on new challenges and responsibilities. My colleagues noticed the shift in my energy. I was no longer the quiet guy weighed down by personal turmoil. I was becoming someone who took pride in his accomplishments and looked forward to the future. One evening, Sarah and I attended an outdoor concert together. As we sat on the grass, the sun setting behind the stage, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me. We shared snacks and laughter, and I caught glimpses of the joy that had been missing from my life for so long. As the music played, I turned to her, feeling an urge to express what had been on my mind. "You know, I'm not ready to dive into anything serious yet, but I really enjoy spending time with you. You've helped me see that there's light after the darkness." She smiled, her eyes sparkling in the twilight. "I feel the same way. Let's just take things one day at a time, okay? No pressure, just enjoying each other's company." Her response made me feel lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. I realized that I was finally in a place where I could enjoy life without the baggage of my past looming over me. I had learned to stand on my own, to embrace the journey ahead, and it felt exhilarating. As summer unfolded, I found joy in the little things, spontaneous road trips, weekend hikes, and evenings spent with friends. I was no longer just a shadow of my former self. I was becoming who I was meant to be. Looking back on the pain and heartache, I recognized that they had served a purpose. They had propelled me into a journey of self-discovery, teaching me resilience and the importance of self-worth. I had learned that I was deserving of love, trust, and happiness. Ultimately, I understood that healing was not a linear process. It came in waves, sometimes crashing over me unexpectedly, but each wave brought me closer to acceptance and peace. I had discovered that while time reveals character, it also reveals strength, the strength to walk away from what no longer served me and to embrace a future filled with possibilities. As I sat on that grassy knoll, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of hope. Whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it head-on, knowing that I carried the lessons of my past with me, and they would guide me toward a brighter tomorrow.